diagnostic medical sonography general consultation. I work very closely with Professor Lohman, who is a program director for cardiovascular branch or wing of our sonography programs here in Grand Valley. And I teach most fundamental courses in our program as well.
I guess it's my turn then, huh?
Yep.
All right. My name is Charlie Kiter. I am the clinical coordinator for the radiation therapy and medical dosimetry programs here at Grand Valley. Our dosimetry program is a graduate program, so that may be the next step for some of you radiation therapists. Here I'm one of two faculty. Dr. Lachelle Palmer-Jones is our program director, and she teaches alongside me in most of your courses if you are going to the radiation therapy track.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlie. So what we are going to do now is just kind of jump into the actual application pieces. So I'm going to share my screen here with you, and then we're just going to briefly go through the different aspects of the application, talk about a few unique pieces, and then we'll transition over to question and answer. When we get to the question and answer part, I'll do my best to monitor the chat. So if you have questions, you can always type them into the chat. You should be able to raise your hand within Zoom. So if you'd like to raise your hand and unmute yourself, you can always ask a question that way. So here, we'll start by me sharing my screen. And okay, we'll start on the main Grand Valley homepage. So there's a few different ways you can find the application. You can go to the program websites, that's totally okay. Or you can go to our Student Services Office website, which some of you may be familiar with if you've ever scheduled an advising appointment with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump over to the radiation therapy website. You'll be able to find the application right here. So right on the front page, it says admissions process. If you click that apply button, what it's going to do is it's going to take you to the actual application itself. So a couple of things before we start looking at the different pieces. To fill out the actual program application, all you need to do is click this button right here, and that'll take you to the application. We'll go through that here in a second, but the directions and information that you need in order to fill out the application can be found right here. So there are a couple of different pieces, one being the verification of course completion form, which is basically just your way of showing the program, this is how I'm going to complete all of the prerequisite and general education requirements that are needed for the program. So essentially, you're just going to go through that form and fill it out. If folks have specific questions about that, we can pull that up during the Q&A. Same with the recommendation form. So this is going to be what you send to the people that you've chosen to be your recommenders. It's a form that your people need to fill out. So they don't have to write you a letter. I think a lot of people, when they hear recommendation, they think letter, but they only need to fill out this form, which has some check boxes and some short answer questions. So there's that there. You're also going to need to type up a statement of professional goals, which essentially just explains why you're interested in sonography or radiation therapy. You can definitely tell the program a little bit about yourself as far as, you know, if I've come to radiation therapy or sonography from a different major, you can kind of explain your thinking of why that's a good fit for you. You can kind of talk a little bit about yourself and maybe some future plans. If you already kind of know what you want to do, you can definitely tap into that as well. You're going to have to turn in a resume. So I would strongly recommend having the Career Center look over your resume. They have drop-in hours Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So you can definitely pop in there real quick, your resume. If you don't have a resume created, they can help you build one from scratch. So they'll meet you wherever you're at there, but I would strongly encourage you to have them look it over before you submit it. We've got the verification of course completion form. This section here, basically all it wants you to do is send in any transcripts for courses that you might have taken outside of Grand Valley. I would assume most of the people on this call are already admitted to the university themselves. You do need to be an admitted student in order to apply. So if we have any non-Grand Valley students on there, that's the first application you need to fill out is the actual university application. But otherwise, all this is really asking you to do is to make sure that you've sent in any non-Grand Valley coursework that you might have. So again, deadline's February 1st. If you have any questions, you can definitely call our office or email Jody, and she can definitely help you figure out logistics of the application. But once you have all the pieces together, you're just going to essentially click on the application and you're going to start filling it out. Okay. A lot of this information is pretty straightforward. So if you're looking at these questions thinking, oh, this is kind of easy, that's because we've kind of made it that way. So don't overthink some of these things. You're going to put in your name. The big thing is going to be which program are you going to be applying to? And I know that we have a lot of students who want to apply to sonography and actually have interest in both programs. So if you click sonography, the application is going to ask you which program is your first choice. So if you're going to apply to both programs, you do have to put down a first choice. If you decided like, hey, the cardiovascular program is really the only one I'm interested in, I don't want to apply to the other program, you can choose just one of those options. But you're going to go through here, fill out some of this information. Again, it's all fairly straightforward. Emergency contact. You're going to put in your current GPA. If you took classes at another institution, you can fill that in as well. Have you already completed a bachelor's degree? Again, a lot of these questions are fairly simple. The nice part about the application is you don't have to submit these other pieces outside of the application itself. So you can upload your statement of professional goals. You can upload your resume, your verification form, and list in the names of the folks who are going to be your recommenders. So all that stuff can be put into the application. You don't need to send that anywhere else. And then once you're done, you're going to sign it and date it and then submit the application. So like I said, if we have questions about any of the particular pieces, I mean, we can always dive into those more specifically, but I want to make sure that I save the bulk of our time for question and answer. So like I said, at this point, we're going to turn it over to you all. I'll be monitoring the chat, so feel free to type in your questions that way. If you would like to raise your hand and then unmute yourself, you can definitely ask a question that way as well. So I'll kind of open it up to the floor at this point, and when you're ready, jump on in.
Mike, maybe I'll get the ball rolling. I think that one question that always comes up is for interviews face-to-face, what questions are you going to ask? Well, we don't usually disclose those ahead of time, but if you're here and you're coming to this question and answer, I'd like to give one freebie away. It's you better know what your profession or your proposed profession does in healthcare. So your first question is probably going to be, if it's for radiation therapy, is what does a radiation therapist does? And if it's for sonography, it's going to be, what does a sonographer do on a daily basis? So have a good understanding of what you're getting yourself into is my first tip.
Let me add to that a little bit. That is very important. And please try to go beyond just Wikipedia and maybe watch some videos which are widely available and kind of look for the chats of what is exactly profession like on day-by-day basis. For instance, for sonography, there should be a realization that you will be in a dark environment, looking at the dark screen for most of your day, and some rooms don't have windows. So I did have experience in some students who like the idea to be in the program and be sonographers realize that that's definitely not what they want to do. So things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think Ava Gainfield, I think you were going to ask a question maybe when you had unmuted yourself.
Yes, so I had a question. So for the form regarding like the courses that you're supposed to take, so due to like a couple of scheduling issues over the past couple semesters, I wasn't able to take a class that's needed in order to like apply for the program. So if I put that like in the comments, because I know that there's like a little comment section, do you think that's okay? Or do you think that because like I plan to take it, if it's possible to apply for the program, I plan to take that class like during the spring.
Yeah.
Do you think that's possible to do that?
That's totally okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All the programs ask is that you have all of the prerequisites, general education classes outside of issues. Issues don't need to be completed beforehand, but all the ones just need to be done before the program starts in the fall. So spring is definitely an option.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Can I just add to that in that light? Yes, it's absolutely possible and it happens all the time. Just keep in mind that we accept C or higher, so it's not C minus. And if someone gets accepted in the program, but they're still in the process of completing those classes and for whatever reason they weren't able to achieve that grade, that place in the program will be lost for them. So just keep that in mind, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike, any change to the physics courses being offered in the spring, summer from GRCC? I know that's always been a kind of a course that people put off till spring, summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I haven't heard one way or the other what GRCC schedule is looking like, but yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait on that. I know our schedule comes out February 1st. I would assume theirs probably comes out sometime around there as well. So we'll know fairly quick what they're going to be offering. But
great.
Question in the chat here says, can you come back to the resume for help at GVSU, please? So yeah, we can definitely talk a little bit more about the resume itself. Eva, did you have any specific questions about it?
I'll say, as far as resumes, from my perspective, any volunteer time that you have, please try and document as accurately the amount of time that you spent and the years that was. For my program, and I think it's the same, Tatiana, for yours, you know, volunteer time is required, but it's volunteer time during your college years. So if you were in high school and doing National Honor Society hours or things like that, that doesn't count for us. It's great and it was good experience for you getting into then the university. But at this point, we're looking for what you've done while you've been here at Grand Valley or at a different university, so that it shows us that you can balance you know, this university type education and the expectations there with, you know, also volunteering and having a job and having all these other extracurricular type of activities. And that's what we're looking for, because we do expect a lot from our students while they're in the programs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tatiana, anything to add on that before we jump to another question?
No, just be precise. Yes, if times, dates, numbers.
Awesome. All right, so a couple of questions from the chat before we get to Josie. Question says, do the recommendations have to be completely filled out before we apply, or do we send that after we apply? So that's a good logistical question, because recommendations are something that you don't have total control over as the applicant. So what will happen is, for the most part, your recommenders will fill out the form and then they can just email it directly to us. So at the bottom of the form, there's an email address that they can send it to. So that's probably the simplest way for that to happen, is for them to just email it back to us. You can turn in your application at any point. So you don't have to wait for your recommenders to send it in. So if you got the application filled out, if everything's ready to go, you could turn it in today if you wanted to. Just make sure that you type in the names of the people who are your recommenders. And then on the back end, we'll go in and match those up. So like I said, you can turn it in early. You don't have to wait for them. I would probably give your recommenders just a heads up as we're getting closer to the deadline, just to make sure that they don't miss it. But yeah, you can handle that, any way that you want. And then another quick question from the chat. Is it
Mike, can I jump in about recommenders real fast? Well, since we're
Oh,
on
yeah.
that subject of recommenders. Make sure that you guys have this conversation. I think Mike was alluding to that you need to talk with people that you're asking for recommendations. Make sure that they're able to highly recommend you. And I would use that language specifically because I think that's what is in our recommendation letter is highly recommend. That gives you the most points towards your application. And it is point-based, and we do try and make it quantified so that we have a way to evaluate you all. So just make sure you have a conversation, make sure that you ask them if they can highly recommend you. And if they can't, and that's okay, try and find somebody who can. Make sure that it's somebody that's not a family member, but it can be anybody in your life that maybe you've worked for, preferably, or have worked with. Professors, things like that are good recommendation people.
Awesome. All right. Last question before we get to Josie. Is it C or higher for both programs? I know it is for sonography, so minimum grade C or higher, and same for radiation therapy. Charlie's nodding his head. So yeah, all the prerequisites for all three programs have to be at least a C or higher for that. So, all right, Josie, let's hand it over to you next.
Hi guys, thank you for hosting this meeting, but I did want to ask about the resume part. As far as when you're filling that out, I know it asked for like a specific healthcare section. What if all of your past job experiences are in the healthcare anyways? Would you have to just omit that healthcare section on the resume part?
And you fill out on the healthcare section. That
Yeah, it would count towards it.
we will read through, but if it's under that umbrella, that's where you put it in.
Okay,
We will
awesome.
find
Thank
it.
you.
If it's there, we will find it. Just be specific with dates and position and location.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, let's head over to Miss Wynn next, and then we'll take a couple from the chat.
I have a question back to the application. So they have about the section academic information. It's asked about please list all previous college and university attended. Actually, I work at KVCC for a while, about 2-3 years ago. So do you have to get a GPA to be added in that?
Yeah, so if you took classes at KVCC, even if it was a couple of years ago, you'll want to type that in to that section. And,
I don't know how to get that GPA again because I don't remember it all.
oh, no, you don't have to worry about the GPA. You don't have to type that in. You just need to make sure that you send us the transcript if you haven't already done so. Just make sure
And I
you have.
checked about 2 class, the prerequisite class at GRCC, just only 2, Physics 1 and Physics 2. Do you have to add that one too?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And after enrollment into the radiation therapy program, so is that have to be high, B or higher than a B to be kept in the program?
Yeah,
right?
so once you're in the program, yeah, we elevate that minimum grade to an 80%, which for the Grand Valley grading system is a B-. So you are allowed to fail one course, so that means less than an 80%, and the same is true for sonography, and still be within the programmatic process where you can stay in the program. If you fail more than one class, so less than an 80% in any one of our specialty programs, so RIT is our prefix, then you would be asked to disenroll and you'd have to reapply.
Okay, and I just talked with academic advisor, and she have sent for me example of the calendar schedule. So we have to be follow that calendar when we enrollment in the radiation therapy. Like we have to take about 16 credit for a semester.
Yeah,
Right.
So we are a cohort style program. So we move lockstep, both us and sonography. So once you're enrolled in the program, starting that fall semester, you move lockstep. And we have our program set up where you're taking anywhere from 16, I think one semester you have 17 in my program, and then 15 your two senior years, but you're full on through the spring, summer as well. So there are a lot of requirements outside of the normal undergraduate that we ask of our students. And that's why there's this secondary application process, is to make sure that as much as we're looking for people who will be successful, we want to make sure you understand all the requirements as well, so that you are able to get through our rigorous programs.
All right, yeah, thank you.
Okay, couple questions from the chat regarding interviews. Are those going to be in person, on Zoom? Where do you all stand with that?
Well, for sonography, we have a same admission process for both sonography programs, both faculties interviewing, and as of today, which can happen anytime, we are planning face-to-face interviews.
I'll echo that as well. As of today, we are planning face-to-face as well.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. We've got some recommendations. Resume question. Okay, yep. It's going to be Zoom or in person, so plan for in person for that. Looks like we're fairly caught up in the chat. One question on resume: should we include things that are strictly only from college? So maybe this Amber's referencing, like, can we put high school stuff on there? Like, what would you recommend for that?
I mean, you can put high school things on there. That's not bad as far as job experience, but just know that when we're looking at as far as the radiation therapy program is concerned, when we're looking at your resume, we're giving you credit towards things you did while you were in college. So things that you did while you were in high school, while it gives us more insight into who you are, it doesn't necessarily add value to your application for us in the terms of the points numbers, if that makes sense.
I agree with that.
Awesome. Next question is in regards to timeline. So we know the deadline's February 1st. Could you give a little bit of insight as far as maybe a rough estimate of when students could hear whether they made the interview or not, and then whether they've been admitted or not?
Yeah, we were talking about this actually this week about timelines and how we're going to set up interviews. Right now for radiation therapy, we're looking at interviews being possibly the last week of February, first week of March, so that students know where they stand by spring break.
For us, it's a very similar timeline. We may move it a little bit and make it a little bit sooner. But by spring break, that's typically our goal to respond, and students will know that they've been admitted or not into the program. And then first communication would be invitation to interviews. And then whoever is not invited will get correspondence as well.
Okay, so everybody will know, regardless of if you made the interview or not, where you stand.
So yeah, make sure that you have accurate email address, and not only that, you check in that email that you don't miss communication from us.
Absolutely, yeah, don't want to miss that. So Lydia has a question about total number of people who typically accept it. So how many seats are we looking at for this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. It always varies by our clinical capacity, which kind of fluctuates year by year. And we kind of think about that going into admissions. Typically for radiation therapy, we're talking about 18 students. We've been as high as 19 and recently as few as 16. We're always willing to, we've recently expanded some of our clinical network, but again, that's a fluid number based on availability of staff and equipment that kind of dictates how many students we feel comfortable taking. We also, a lot of times, and I'm sure this is true for sonography as well, when we're looking at the quantitative piece, there ends up being a line in the sand. There really ends up being a line of students that we feel would be successful based on our holistic admissions, and a group of students that we think, well, they might be better served doing maybe one more year, trying to repeat some courses, get some more experience, that sort of thing. And so that line helps us kind of dictate also how many students we take. And I'll say it's typically around about 50% of the applications are yes, and the other 50% are on the no side.
Okay. It does apply to us as well. On average, general, we take anywhere between 20 and 22 students, and my cardiovascular partners, they take anywhere between 16 to 18 students. But that number can vary. Situation is fluid. It's truly understatement. So we will be approaching that basically at the time of applications. For us, typically, we have probably 2 to 3 students per seat applying.
Okay. So Chloe has a question about the verification form, and I'm actually going to share my screen here a second to answer it. So the question kind of centers around how should we document on the form maybe a class that you haven't completed yet. So we know physics is a prominent class students will take in the summer. So essentially all you would need to do to document that is just follow the example that we have up here. So let's say you're planning on taking physics at GRCC, and over there, their physics 1 class is called Physics 125. You would type in GRCC PH 125. For the semester that you're planning to do it, you can write summer 2022. And then obviously you won't have a grade yet for this one because you haven't taken the class yet. So you can just leave that blank. You don't need to put anything in for that. There's also, as we mentioned earlier, there's a section down at the bottom. If you have additional comments, you could write in there, plan to take physics in the summer, should have it done by August. But again, the programs will know that just based on the fact that you wrote summer 2022 in there. So that's all you would need to do for the rest of these. Like if you know that you have a grade, so let's do BMS 250. Let's say you took that fall 2021 and you got an A. That's all you would need to do for that, is just fill that out and then continue on to the next thing. So I will stop sharing my screen now. Hopefully that makes sense, Chloe. But yeah, as far as grades go, you don't need to put anything in there for that if you haven't completed the class yet. Clinicals were touched on briefly, but I want to open that up. So could you both explain kind of how the clinical process works, what the what would be expected of students, and kind of dig into some of that?
Sure. For both sonography programs, the clinical rotations are similar. The first semester you admitted, you don't have any clinical rotation. You're just going through didactic and laboratory courses. So we prepare you for entrance in the clinical environment. The second semester in the program, that's your first clinical rotation. The location you will be placed at will be the same over the summer. So during your first semester of clinical rotation, which is winter semester of your first year in the program, you will be in clinic twice a week, Mondays and Tuesdays, and then the rest of your week will be devoted to laboratory courses and didactic courses on campus. So going into spring, summer, that's when you will be going through immersion into clinical rotation. You will be in clinic 4 days a week. And typically we do not have any other courses during that time. You may be taking some issue courses, which are typically online or hybrids. That's going to be your first clinical rotation. Then your second year in the program, your senior year, you have 2 more rotations, which will be different locations. And at that time, you will be 3 times a week at the clinic, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and twice a week, Mondays and Tuesdays, you will be on campus. Depending on your clinical site, you may be able to have adjustment to your schedule in the sense you may be doing 2 shifts of 12s or some additional Saturdays if it works for you. But overall, that's the schedule we expect you to follow.
Yeah, I think that sums it up for the radiation therapy program as well. You get 3 different experiences throughout the program, an extended time at your first location, and then 2 semesters in your senior year that would be at different locations. The expectation for travel is there as well. It's an added cost, and we understand that. And we just tell students, make sure you plan on being up to 3 hours away for your clinical rotation. We try and group those clinical days together and your didactic days together. So for example, your first semester in clinic being this winter would be our students that got in last year. It's their first experience. They're in clinic Monday and Tuesday, in class Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The 4th years or our senior students are on an opposite schedule. So they're in class Monday, Tuesday, and then, clinic Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Every year for your, we always have a student that says, they're having, difficulty getting to or from their clinical site. So we always try to encourage, plan ahead, meaning start thinking about looking at our websites and seeing what clinical sites we offer. Start thinking about people in those areas and asking if maybe you can spend some time at their house or on their couch. We do always have students overlapping between the programs. So for the most part, the sonography locations, the radiation therapy locations, while you may not have another student in your cohort at one of those clinical sites, there might be another student from Grand Valley traveling there on the same days, and that can really help you defer some of the travel costs of things like that you would incur having to go back and forth.
And let me emphasize this point that it is expected that you understand that some of the rotations can be as far as 3 hours driving one way. For instance, we have Kalkaska, we have Detroit, we have South Bend. So please make sure to prepare that your car is safe to drive, that you consider that as additional expenses, and we are very open and transparent about that. But that is a necessary requirement, so to speak, for your best clinical experience.
For sure, yes. Don't want to be stranded, that's for sure, if your car's not working properly. We'll get to Elena's question next, but Kaylee's kind of builds off of the clinical area that we're on right now. So she's wondering, can students request certain sites, or how does the assignment process work?
Yeah, I mean, we do take student requests into account, but no, it's not necessarily going to be guaranteed that it will be your site. Ultimately, the programs make the final decisions as to where students are placed based on what we feel is maybe best suited for your learning, what the clinical site actually is willing to accommodate. With that first clinical site in mind being the longest, we sometimes do put the most emphasis in what if a student has family or friends there, then yes, we might be able to make sure that you have a better chance than others to go there, but not necessarily solely just because you requested it, are you going to get placed there? I always tell students, just be ready to have to go 3 hours away for one of your 3 rotations. And it may be not where you've asked to go.
Yeah, that logic applies to us as well. I do collect preferences, but that just for information. There are a lot of thought and strategic planning put in for placement for our students. We want to make sure that you have best match at the level you're at any given semester. And you want to make sure that you have well-rounded experience before you graduate. So we want to make sure that you're rotating between sites which expose you to those experiences and offer you different types of scanning, different types of environments. So in general, we try to be balanced and fair. So if you have far distant rotation, so we try to place you in close one next time, or we have 2 intermediate rotations maybe. But overall, the whole goal is to make sure that you will be equipped with the best clinical experience you can put on your resume when you graduate, and that you're exposed to different paces of environment, different types of medical facilities, different exams. And that will help you also to decide where would you rather be when you graduate too.
Yeah, I think that can't be emphasized enough either. That when the reason behind the 3 sites is really just that. It's really to give you 3 unique experiences. And I know for my program, and I'm going to assume the same for sonography, when our students graduate, there's probably maybe 5% of the things they have not seen out there in the professional world, as far as technology, procedures, ways of doing things, that you leave one of the Grand Valley programs well prepared to go into the workforce. And when you go, you can get a job across the country, and they're probably not going to surprise you with a lot of something new to you that you have not at least seen once in the field. So yeah, it sounds like a lot, and it is. But that is the Grand Valley standard, right? We hold ourselves to a much higher standard, and we produce graduates that live up to that. And this is kind of the process behind it, and it's how we make that happen.
Absolutely. Okay, let's transition back to prerequisites for a second. So let's say a student takes a prereq class and doesn't get a C. How would that factor in? Like when you guys are looking at applications, let's say, you have A's and B's, and Elena's question is specific to physics. So let's say your grade in physics is low, but you have A's and B's in the other prereqs. Like how do you all look at that when you're looking at applications?
So this happens. This happens, unfortunately, maybe every couple of years, where a student is conditionally admitted and still has one of the physics classes to take, and they don't get a C. It doesn't count. We look at it as if you did not pass that class. And unfortunately, that means the student has to retake that class, get that C or higher, and reapply to the program.
Absolutely. Yeah. So please keep that in mind, because if you got admitted and you still didn't take your physics, and you have an inkling that will be a difficult and challenging course for you, well, you make sure you either pass it with the necessary required grade, or be prepared that if not, then your place will be lost in that cycle.
Yeah, and Elena, I can say sometimes I'll run into students who, they've taken physics maybe twice, and then they're like, hey, I don't think I want to do this again. Like that's okay. Like you don't have to keep repeating the same class over and over. At that point, our conversation is going to be different though, right? Like at hers, you got to have a C in order to get into the programs, but maybe we look at, some other options. We do work with the Career Center to offer what's called parallel planning, and we will have some sessions coming up in the month of February. So you'll get information about that. Definitely check out a session. I think it's good to kind of think through like, okay, what are some other options just in case this doesn't work. But yeah, C or higher is the grade that you would need to have.
And let me add to that in regard to physics specifically, there is a reason behind it. It's not just arbitrary, it's just we decided that's what they want to do. That's just a factor which is significant in your possible success in completion of the program, because understanding of physics is fundamental for the sonography program of baccalaureate level. So if someone was not able to go through this successfully, maybe it's not their type of science. That's as simple as that. And then that means that it's kind of a silver lining then you are facing that ahead of time and not going to struggle in the program and then ultimately not succeed. So there's a reason behind it. It's a kind of indicator of how well are you suited to be in the field.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's as much as you're wanting to be in our programs, we want you in our programs and we want you to be successful and we want you to, you know, flourish. And we don't want you to struggle. And again, like Tatiana said, it's an indicator of your success throughout the program. We've both had students in our programs that have made it fairly a good distance into the program and then had to drop out or failed out of the program because they couldn't complete the more difficult tasks. And this is, again, an indicator of that success that we want for you. And so we maybe rightly or wrongly use that as part of our prediction model. It just has been in there and it has been given us good information about the probability of success for our students.
All right, let's transition to experience. So we've been living in the COVID world for almost 2 years now. And it's been a challenge for students to get experience, you know, whether that's shadowing or volunteer experience in healthcare. So what advice would you give a student who maybe just hasn't had an opportunity to get that type of experience? Like, how would you coach them to kind of work through that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of factors here, and this was kind of pre-COVID too. HIPAA was starting to really kind of lock us out of having those kind of observational type experiences just with health compliance and all sorts of things leading up to the pandemic. And so I started to tell students, you know, yes, volunteerism would be great. If you can get healthcare experience either in a working or volunteer kind of situation, that would be awesome. But healthcare really is kind of a service-based profession. So if you have work experience as, you know, a waiter, waitress, or some other service type experience, that does apply. It does show us that you were able to have people interaction skills and have that sort of ability. I also tell students, find somebody that's in healthcare and try and pick their brain and see if they know somebody in the field that you're going into. Try and have them make a connection for you with a radiation therapist that you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with and ask them, what is your day like? What do you like about the job? What don't you like about the job? So you get another understanding of the field. And I think lastly is, it doesn't have to be specific to the profession you're looking to apply to, but any experience kind of in the hospital, volunteer-wise or paid, shows you how to interact with other professionals and other professions. And I think that interprofessional piece has become one of the mainstays of our healthcare system right now. And that's kind of what we're wanting you to pick up on is how do you interact with other professionals on a day-to-day basis?
Right. And just remember that we are looking at the whole package of your documentation holistically and comprehensively. So we do understand the limitations which students can run into, especially in these times. So just keep that in mind.
All right. We're all caught up in the chat. Again, feel free to, if you have any questions, I know we're running up on 5 o'clock right now, but yeah, let us know. Feel free to type something in chat. Again, you can raise your hand. That's okay too. So I think one of the last big areas that we haven't really touched on is like, okay, we found out that we've been admitted. What does the like orientation, like, are we meeting as a group before the semester starts? Like what sort of onboarding can we expect before we start the program in the fall?
Sure. For sonography programs, we will have the same orientation for both programs together. That's the time when you will be meeting our faculty, and typically our the president of the college will stop by and say hi. School directors will stop by and say hi and introduce himself as well. We also kind of guide you through what to expect a little bit, and especially what to expect on culture of our programs and how to best use your time over the summer to prepare for start of the semester. So our orientation is typically held sometime around May in that area of the calendar.
Yeah, ours is very similar in nature. It's held a little bit closer to the start of the semester. Ours is usually held in August. So just usually a week or two before the official start of classes, we get everybody meeting together and registered at the same time. And that always ends up being kind of a point that students are get concerned about. Once you're admitted into the program, your kind of scheduling is a little different. You're lockstep scheduling, and the way the radiation therapy program does it is that we kind of get you all together and we schedule all at the same time, so that usually we have Mike there so he can help deal with any problems. But we get you scheduled with plenty of time to meet the scheduling deadline, but know that you no longer have to fight for a spot or a time or a class. You are all in the classes together at the given time, and your schedule is basically set up for you before you even start.
Right. Your seat is reserved, so there's no Hunger Games to get to your seat.
Real quick, will orientations be in person? Well, assuming nothing crazy happens, are we planning for in person or virtual?
In person.
Yep, in person.
Okay.
And I understand that questions coming from, absolutely, there are practical aspects of that, but in general, we are in healthcare field, so we are working in person. We are literally working with patients very close and close proximity. So our philosophy is to get in that professional mode and be in person as much as possibly safely can, and train ourselves to have those interpersonal relationship and skills develop and improve.
As far as like total number of applicants, I can't remember if we touched on this or not, but how many on average do you all see?
I would say for us, it's mid-30s to low 40s.
For us, for both programs, last year we had a little bit more than 100, but invited for interviews was a little bit more than half of them.
Yeah, and I think our number for interviews was in the low 30s to high 20s usually.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, we've been pretty comprehensive as far as timeline and touching on what to expect. Yeah, we've still got a few minutes. Before I forget, thank you, Tatiana and Charlie, for taking the time to meet with us today. I know these sessions are always great, just in the sense that, you know, students like to hear from you all and kind of get some perspective from what faculty are looking for. So appreciate the time. like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. I'm sure, okay, looks like, yep, we got one. Aldridge, if you have a question, go ahead. Hopefully you're typing that question out, but otherwise, I mean, you can always, verbalize it as well if you want. So, okay, here we go. On the statement of professional goals, is there a type of goal that is more favorable, like if they are original and specific? So what sort of, going back to the statement, what sort of things goal would you be looking for?
I would say no to that question. I think the statement of goals is just another opportunity for you to kind of share more about yourself. Again, this is kind of a snapshot. It's hard on us. It's not easy. I always refer to it as the worst time of the year because I feel bad trying to make decisions about who's in and who's out. Obviously, if everybody met our requirements and we had the unlimited number of resources for clinical sites, then I'd let everybody in that meets our requirements. So this just gives us one more kind of glimpse into who you are and kind of what you know about the profession and what type of student you would be. So yeah, I don't know that there's a good answer to your question specifically other than try and be real, be yourself. Don't try and give us what you think we want to hear. Give us what you truly want to say.
And again, remember that our goal is to set you for success. So we want to make sure that it's a great match for you, for your talents, for your ambitions, for your goals. And we want to make sure that we can give that to you, that we can train you and give you all the necessary tools to be successful and very employable and very competitive when you graduate.
Okay, yeah, one thing we didn't talk about was the written portion. So Amber's kind of wondering what to expect with that.
Yeah, so we break up your interview into two portions in the radiation therapy program. It's a written portion and a face-to-face portion. The written portion has some prompted questions, and then obviously the face-to-face portion is going to have a couple of questions for you as well. And so the written portion really are questions that don't necessarily have a right or wrong answer, but we're looking to see that you can think on your feet and reply in a written format in a logical and sensible type of way that is laid out with, the appropriate pieces of writing, a introduction, a body, a conclusion, where you're able to process a question and put your thoughts in writing, just like you would verbally.
Yeah, do you have something else to add?
Yes, I do. Oh, I didn't realize my mic was on. So basically what I'd like to know is, so the written portion, is that something that's online or if they schedule you for an interview?
Yeah, so ours is when you come in for your face-to-face interview, the first half or second half, we usually break up the group. We try and keep it in smaller groups, like groups of 6 students at a time. So 3 of the students might be sitting for the verbal one-on-one interview, and then the other 3 students will be in the classroom completing the written portion, and then we would swap after each is completed.
All right.
Similar pause.
What about the cardiovascular program? Is that
Very similar. We have a same admission process between two programs. We have same faculty interviewing. So as we joke around, we handpick basically all of you. We see the applicants during interviews, and very similar process as well. So it's going to
Okay.
be same day, same time period.
All right. So we'd go in for that one also for the written. All right. I do have a good couple questions. Actually, I wrote out some stuff, so I was ready. If that's all right.
Hold on just a second. Like we're still on the written portion. So question about what types of questions. I mean, they won't tell you all of the questions. I mean, they're not going to give you that, but like what sort of questions like have been asked?
Questions that do not have right or wrong answers, questions which can show your reasoning and kind of logic and logical progression of your thoughts. And within limited amount of time on a limited amount of paper too. So there are two limitations there. So we want to see how well you can reason through some scenario perhaps, or something like that.
Okay, I know we're running up on time, so we'll have, I'm sure Charlie and Tatiana can stick around for a few minutes if anybody has any last minute questions, but I know the session was meant to 5. So if you need to go, if you have other things going on, I mean, feel free. Remember, this session is being recorded, so we will post this to our website. So if you need to come back to any of this conversation just to verify some things, feel free. We're hoping to have the video posted on our website tomorrow. So maybe if you need to come back to it, maybe check back on Friday. Hopefully things will be uploaded smoothly and we'll get that on the site. And tell your friends as well. Like I said earlier, if you had a friend who maybe couldn't make it because of class or had some other obligation going on, feel free to send them to our website, and then they can definitely watch the video from there. So I'm going to stop recording. But like I said, I'm sure we can stick around for a few minutes. I know we have some other questions from there. But yeah, thank you everybody for taking the time to come out. Hopefully you were able to get some good information. Okay. Stop recording, hopefully.